Welcome to a very special guest, someone that I rarely speak to in our bi-weekly podcast. Rob Hamblen, founder of Leap, is joining us for our Prod MBA Product Leadership Summit. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Henry. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Let's talk leadership now. Let's start by giving me a bit of background, because you're not, traditionally in product management or head of product strictly.
Yeah. So, designer by trade. I've been doing it for 25 years. So, quite a senior kind of product designer now, I would say, and have the honor and privilege to kind of give creative and product direction to a lot of big global companies around the world. And in that position, let me probably just give a little bit of background as to kind of like where I've worked, so just so that you can start, building that little bit of a picture up. I used to be a senior design manager for Qualcomm Incorporated. They used to be based out of San Diego. I ran the creative satellite team of UX and UI designers out of Cambridge in the UK, and also art directed their designers based in San Diego as well. And also in my travels around the world, used to be creative director of UX for IBM, and used to be product design director for AJ & Smart, running the design sprint. So hopefully that kind of enables you to kind of understand the kind of clients that we used to work with and the kind of conversations that I might have had in my kind of experience with those products that we were helping.
That's where I think that's where I saw this is a really interesting conversation, because like having done lots of workshops, right, observing behavior in product teams who ultimately are getting you in to solve some sort of problem. Maybe to kick off, what does product leadership mean to you?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And for me, I would almost say that I'm a product advisor. So, obviously with regards to a creative team, I can lead them. But with regards to actual product leadership, this is where, if I'm running sprints for companies, for example, I would be having conversations with either like CTOs or CPOs. And I would say those would be the positions where this is where, they really need to have their shit together in order to kind of make good products, because, they are responsible. Ultimately, they're responsible for bringing the teams together, monetizing initiatives, and also, their butt is on the line basically for, meeting deadlines to make these products. So I would say leadership basically falls on their shoulders. That's not to say that anyone else who contributes to the success or making of a product doesn't have an ownership. They do. It just means that those very senior people, it tends to be, their vision of something that's going to be made.
Interesting. Before we spoke, we were talking about that story you mentioned, or maybe your experience with. Are we allowed to name them? You fine?
Yeah, maybe I won't name the client, but it was a really interesting story. Maybe we should build up to it before I suddenly go into it. But maybe I can. I'll mention where I was working, but I won't mention who the client was.
No names.
I have my dog in the background. Apologies for her.
No, it's fine. It's joining. It wants to be part of the show.
Because I think this tied in really nicely with the leadership and kind of decisions made. And it's, like the story that I will tell, it's not about, like we still made the products and and they became very successful in their own right. It's good. Sorry, she's just snuck out, so we can now relax. My little high maintenance whippet is now taking herself off somewhere around there. So going back to this kind of story. So at this time, I was creative director for UX for IBM, and responsible for the kind of the visual and product kind of. The first year this product got made, it got launched, it won awards, it was like hugely successful. It ended up saving that client tons of money because people were baked more into the product from the beginning rather than joining later when problems might have arisen with the healthcare product. And basically, the second phase of the project was kind of kicking off. So, after that very first and, tremendously successful first year, the analogy that I will give, and maybe some of you listening have maybe heard about this before. So if you imagine the first year, the first vision of the product was we were making a car. This is the analogy that I'm giving. When it came to actually designing the second part of this, the kind of iteration on this same product, but with more features and with more grit, basically. The analogy was that we needed to build an aeroplane because obviously it was advancing it significantly. We were integrating IoT. There were huge health dependencies based on the features that we were adding. So it wasn't just a couple of features to upgrade it. It was like a significant improvement. And I remember just having this kind of meeting. We were sat in this meeting room, and this is where it ties in really nicely with the leadership, because the leadership of that project, they were going, right, well, this is great. We have so many foundations already. We can just now, make these quick changes and add these few enhancements, and it'll be great. And I was kind of listening to the conversations going around the room, and I was thinking to myself, well, they are just gonna inherit problems if they do it this way. And going back to that analogy, they wanted to go from the car to the airplane. They were literally talking about just bolting wings onto this car and hoping that it was going to fly. And it got to the point where I was already in my brain kind of processing how the new changes were going to be really influencing and affecting the existing UX, the existing UI. And in my mind, it was just piecing it together that this just wasn't going to work out. So I proposed a kind of a halt to the discussion, and had a very quick workshop, sub kind of workshop that came out to kind of work out how we would actually make these changes. And actually, I can't take full credit for this, but the team that I worked with, we all literally put our heads down, and I really came up with a really cool solution. But it meant that there was an impact of 2 weeks to the roadmap. And 2 weeks for me was almost insignificant than the actual amount of headaches that we would have inherited. Trying to fix things, trying to bolt things on, things breaking the UX and having inconsistencies. And we were having really strong goals and objectives to win awards again, and it had to win awards. Basically, that was the brief. That was almost like a stronger brief than actually the product itself. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm listening to all these kind of hacks that they wanted to do, and they go. That's my point. You can't criticize the conversation that was had, because this was a strategic conversation about, okay, how can we do this in the most quickest, most effective way? But what it meant was that I kind of saw through their plan and kind of realized that they were going to just inherit a shitstorm kind of later on. And by taking 2 weeks out, we were able to kind of mitigate that and actually rebuild the home screen from the ground up so that it could accommodate all these IoT features, for example. And it worked. It worked really well. I had to push my team super, super hard in those 2 weeks so that we, I actually put my role and my reputation on the line, because we had to make those changes in 2 weeks, and we had to do a lot of work. But it just meant that we only lost 2 weeks, and we were able to kind of pull that back. You can go into more kind of stories with regards to what did it cost us at the end, and how much was the app in the first place. I won't kind of share that here. But it was received initially with a lot of friction, and I had to do a very long and justified conversation and argument to kind of push that way forward. But I think ultimately, when I spoke in monetary terms and deadlines, they could really understand that was going to be a long-term saving that they were going to make. So really interesting story, and I'm sure that I'm not the only person to have experienced that kind of analogy.
You touched upon, sorry to jump in. Yeah, I think you touched on some really key principles with that around. It's yes, the processes help. So particularly in your case, as a workshop facilitator, having that skill ultimately helps you solve problems, right? But that's not the most important thing in my view. And that's the theme that I've been seeing from the conversations in this product leadership series is like, yeah, processes help, frameworks help, but ultimately it is simple things like, just thinking a bit more long term, being bold as well. So saying, actually it is worth just pausing, let's do 2 weeks, sort this out, and then go back to
up actually is probably the biggest thing,
yeah,
because
just
you have
exactly.
the hierarchy of these teams where probably a lot of people are genuinely maybe too scared to speak up, or
exactly. And again, think of leadership like that. It's a simple thing, simple on paper, hard to do. And things just like communication and alignment. I think we've always talked about this, right? Just sort of just like being nice, getting on with people. These sort of soft skills are actually the job. That is really the job. It's like get along with people, get them sort of move in the right direction. It communicates that everyone's clear on stuff, and you don't need, let's say, specifically all these frameworks, processes, etc. Like it helps, but I don't think that's the key thing about it. I liked as well that you touched upon sort of like putting things in monetary terms, ultimately like putting things in other people's terms.
Yeah.
Any like tips, tactics you do with that? Because I think that's a really useful skill for stakeholder management.
Yeah, just to really, for me, I just try and really understand the person that I'm going to be talking to the most.
Like jug with iced tea.
Yeah, just to kind of, for me, like, I just like to know who I'm talking to, almost like from a psychological perspective, because people operate differently, and like you can't have the same conversations for everybody, because that's just where you fail. And for me, like, actually for me, that goes into a bit of radical candor as well. Like, a radical candor is great for probably 75% of the workforce, but it's not like a one size fits all for everybody.
What is radical candor for anyone that hasn't?
Radical candor is about how to kind of give kind of honest feedback to people without really offending them. And it talks about when you like sandwich good like positive feedback with negative and then positive again, that tends to be not the way to really deliver feedback. If people tend to appreciate like the honesty and the negatives more openly than that. And I mean, I don't want to go down, maybe it's a conversation for another day, but it's a really good book. I definitely recommend reading it. I think it's really good if it's like a management 101 and you don't know how to manage people. It's really good, but don't basically take everything as the rule of thumb for everybody, because you will have people crying, or you will just have people telling you to fuck off if you use that for like everybody. But it's generally good just to give you an understanding of like how you can approach feedback and difficult conversations, particularly with people. But going back,
no, go ahead.
Yeah, going back to like, how do you have those conversations? Like, for me, I don't know, like for me now, I find this kind of easy, because I kind of generally very quickly have a feel for who I'm talking to. And in my time, probably especially the last 5 or 6 years, where I've had to have really senior conversations with like general managers or CEOs, for example, I had to up my game with my conversation. I did, there were things where I could have had a better conversation there with that person.
Yeah. And
it's only through having those conversations with really senior people. I mean, they're human at the end of the day. They're not like alien or anything, but they do understand things. You can have like focal points or topics or words that you could definitely choose within your vocab that's going to hit home a little bit harder. And any CEO will want to talk about money and how it's going to affect them. So if you can definitely relate scenarios back in a monetary sense, impacts, utilization, these kind of things, they will really appreciate that, and it will give you more credibility for them to actually do.
But I mean,
so when I was having these conversations with the wings of the car and how much time that's going to cost, I had to give a fully justified like understanding of like where it was going to save them money in the long term. And they weren't happy about it. Like, I'm not going to lie, like I was not the favorite person for a week or so, but I think when they realized that the plan actually made sense and that they were going to save time and money, then they slowly started.
Oh, I think you froze for a second. I think
Yeah, you were right.
uh, that touches upon as well that I think one thing I've been guilty of before, and I know that other product people are, is there's this focus on the customer, right? We're always told focus on the customer, just which is true to an extent, but also particularly as a product person, you do need to think about business value, and they don't always go hand in hand. Like you can build great products that are very difficult to make money on. So
Yeah.
both for managing stakeholders, but secondly, just for the success of a product, you need to have that in mind at all times as well.
Yeah.
There's one other thing I wanted to say, but I completely forgot what it was. No, it slipped my mind. But
It's
anyway.
interesting that while you think about that, it was interesting when you mentioned, yeah, obviously we're designing products for end users. And, for me, this is like, particularly this year actually as well. And I won't mention any names, but she says that she listens to this podcast. So it would be quite interesting to see if she'll know who this is. But basically, that, yeah, actually, there's a position where if you are responsible for building products from like a creative kind of standpoint, there's a strong component of that where you are trying to encompass the end user into kind of making sure that they're really happy. Like this for me is like this has been my drive for like a long time. Like, yeah, end users, empathy, bring them in, blah blah blah. But a lot of designers, I think, make mistakes about kind of focusing too much on that as well, because you could ultimately never make them happy. You could do endless tweaks, endless iterations, and they're still going to go, oh yeah, but maybe that button could be a little bit higher for my finger on this occasion, or maybe you could make it.
Yeah, it's just missing the strategic, like bigger picture. Not always the fault of an individual, right? It depends on the organization, but just being like, how does this fit into a larger picture? Like, do I have to deprioritize some piece of user value or even the product itself in favor of another aspect of it? And I think again, time maybe wrapping up on that point. That comes down to ultimately, like, yes, you can skill up in things like strategy or go and do an MBA, but actually, you have to. It's about more about things like being bold, being honest, communicating clearly. As you said,
being transparent, I think is a really big one.
These kind of soft skills.
Because I think people will ultimately trust the team more if they know that there's a transparency there. And whether there's 2 people or 35 people, I've worked in teams of all of the above. I know, like I look back on my career and there are leaders who I have the utmost respect for, going back for the last 15 years, and the people that have the most respect for me are the ones that are the most transparent. And there's other people I've crossed paths with, and they've been really skilled people, really heavily immersed in their role. But when they don't provide that transparency, it makes it very hard to kind of make progress, because you're trying to work out who's gaining from this, or are the deadlines real, or are we committing to too much, or it's where you end up doubting a lot of these things.
That's such a good point. Exactly. These are knock-on effects of people being a bit anxious, thinking about the wrong thing because they're worried because they're not clear about what they should be thinking about.
And they're worrying about the wrong things. Exactly.
Anyway, I think that's a good place to finish up on. So I think, we really touched on today, I think the soft skills and actually the importance of those really came through, I think, everything you were saying, which is also, great, because that is ultimately the message that's coming across from everybody I'm speaking to. Should people follow you? Where should they follow you? Where do you want to
you can find me on LinkedIn, Rob Hamblen. And you'll know if you've got the right Rob Hamblen, because it will say that I help CTOs and CPOs make better products. Henry, that might sound familiar for you.
Awesome.
And I'm founder of Leap. You can find me on Instagram at @BeTheLeap as well. And this is a new company this year, so obviously keen to, if you can follow us, we often give away lots of freebies as well, like Miro templates and things like that. So give us a follow, let us know if it's something that you like.
There's also a really famous podcast you do that I've heard of.
Oh yeah, there's this amazing podcast
Really, really,
called
too, like really nice guy.
Yeah, really nice guy, like my co-host. His name is Henry.
I think we do.
You can also give us a listen there as well. And basically, yeah, if you want to listen to two Brits talking about products and why dogs are so intuitive at faking injuries, primarily this is the topic of conversation.
Actually, no, wait, sorry, no, back up on that, because the episode that's coming out next week, we did talk about product stuff.
We did. I know.
So anyway, if anyone wants to follow that, keep an eye on LinkedIn. It's all about the product on iTunes. It has 5 stars, by the way. I'm pretty sure one was me.
Right. I haven't even voted on it yet either. So that's really good that other people think it's that good.
Must be someone that I've told to do it before. I don't remember, but I'm fairly sure.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and also give us a share as well. If you like it, then, tell your friends and colleagues.
I think that's why nobody shared it, but I'm not sure how many people like it. But anyway, thanks so much for the time, Rob. Pleasure as always. And thank you for joining our Product Leadership Summit.
Oh, no worries.